Thank you, Asia. Now I'll just familiarize myself with the pointer. As Chris had mentioned, it's really an exciting time, I think, to be involved in work with technology because things are rapidly changing. We've been working with the TXDOT-TPNP for many years on how to collect O&D data and have really been focusing on these different technologies now for 6 or 8 years. And what I wanted to talk to you about is these three technologies, cellular, GPS, and Bluetooth, and their capabilities and suitabilities for using in different types of studies. I think they are viable options now, and as we continue to move forward, they'll even become more viable. Just to give you a feel for kind of the differences between them, you have to kind of keep those in mind in terms of the type of study and the suitability of the data for that you might need, because they do collect different types of data. They have different data collection time periods that you see. Their sample or their data penetration is quite different between the different technologies. There's a great deal of positional accuracy differences in those, which have a lot to do with making the decision as which one you might want to use where. Their sampling frequency, for example, in cellular data, is highly variable. It can range in minutes to hours between sampling, whereas, for example, GPS data, you can get a continuous sample, although it might just be a partial segment of a trip, although what you get at the time is continuous. And of course, Bluetooth is going to be continuous, but it's only going to be for the period or for the area within which the reader is collecting the data. One of the things that we've done to study these is we did a study in Tyler in 2014 where we took these three different technologies and tried to compare them to benchmark to get some results between them. And as a typical what you would do with an external survey is you're going to primarily focus on studies of vehicles that travel into, out of, and through the area. For example, the green line are external to external trips, or EE. The red line are external to internal, and then the blue line are the internal to external trips. So those are the types of trips and the OD matrices that are needed for development of models. Considering those, my laser won't go off now. Hold on 1 second. There we go. To be able to do this with the different technologies, you have to design the study to be able to set up and capture cellular data. Really, you set up kind of large periphery zones around the study area, kind of around the travel sheds of each one of the major highways that go into and out of the area. And this is where you would capture external cellular data to be able to relate it and study it relative to the internal study area. The Bluetooth equipment, of course, is set out at the external stations around the periphery of the study area, so you're collecting data at each Bluetooth data at each one of these stations, so you can get information on the total amount of traffic going through using the Bluetooth equipment. For the GPS, we're looking at this large kind of, it was about a 10-mile buffer boundary where the data was captured within that area for a 3-month period and was analyzed to be able to process data to be able to figure out the different types of trips here. One of the things that you have to do with cellular data is within each area, there are traffic analysis zones that make up the model for the area. Typically, for cellular data, you're going to have to aggregate those zones for the data to be able to be viable. That's unlike GPS, where you can get to that smaller levels of aggregation. For the most part, we're using Bluetooth in these studies really to benchmark the results of cell and GPS. Okay, very complicated map, but what this shows you, there's 4 quadrants. Upper left is the external survey from 2004 in Tyler. Upper right is the Bluetooth results. Lower left is the cell results, and then the lower right is the GPS results. Just very quickly, if you look at these, it appears that cellular and Bluetooth, they seem to be fairly consistent with each other. If you look at the numbers behind them, they're actually not. And let me back up and just say, obviously, what these represents are in terms of line width and color are the amount of total EE movements or total travel through the study area between these different technologies. The study back in 2004, I don't know how much of a benchmark or comparison it is because things have really changed since 2014 when we did the study. For us, the key things that we find within these slides and this information, once you look at them closely, are that this is I-20 through, is it I-20 or I-30 through Tyler, right here, and the GPS and the Bluetooth equipment both got in the mid-40% of total external trips on I-20 through there. Whereas if you look at the cellular data, while it does appear to have the same amount of external trip making similar to that of Bluetooth, what is actually happening is we are picking up data out in more data, cellular data out in the rural areas than we would normally would be because of just by virtue of the cell towers and the infrastructure that's out there. It's over-representing the actual cellular traffic that we're getting. One thing that we can tell you with the GPS is that you can see, if you look at it, we think what we're showing here, or what is represented with some other information that we have, this laser won't go off, but I'll point it down, is that it does represent a commercial vehicle bias, because for the most part what we're seeing is you're seeing a heavier amount of traffic and movements on higher functional roadways, which commercial vehicles are going to be primarily taking. And also we are aware that the GPS data that we get from the private sector vendors, they do have a bias for commercial vehicle traffic. This just shows you another slide of the total amount of trip-ins by the total of the internal zones within the study area. You see back in 2004, primarily it wasn't developed as much out in the periphery or around the rural areas of the Smith County. Now in 2014, you see both cellular and GPS data seem to show a fairly good representation of trip-ins occurring in all of the different TAS zones in the area. One thing that we do notice whenever we study it more closely is out in these rural areas where there's not too much development, we're getting a higher proportion of trip-ins from cellular data. Again, that's because of the poor positional accuracy and the location, we think, of cell towers out there that could be giving a high representation of traffic than there is that's actually there. You can see with the GPS data here, right along here, these higher levels. Does anyone want to guess what those might want to be along the interstate?
Truck stops.
Truck stops. That's exactly right. So you can kind of see within this a little bit of the commercial bias within the data. Some of the takeaways relative to the suitability of the data. For the EE trips, we think that the GPS data right now is probably the more suitable and gives us better information, particularly at smaller MPO study area levels. That could be different depending upon once we do more studies with larger geographies with multiple counties. For the internal to external trips, right now I think either one of them you'd be able to use, but again, the suitability I think is going to depend upon the size of the study area. And you see some of the different advantages and disadvantages where some you can get residency and commercial freight that you can get with GPS, and demographic information you can get with cellular information. So again, in trying to decide which technology to use, it's going to depend upon what it is that you're trying to get or the objectives of your study. So this area is still evolving. We're doing more testing to better benchmark and validate the data to see which one is most suitable for different types of studies. Right now, it could be a combination of these technologies for the studies that you're looking at. Bluetooth, we think, is still a benchmark for the EE trips because we've done so much testing with it. Cellular data is going to be bigger for major metro areas in Texas, particularly since we can aggregate those zones to much higher levels to make the trip-ins much more accurate there. GPS third-party vendors are now coming on with new products out there. They're being studied. They're options to consider. So I'm going to leave you with that and let my next speaker come up.